The fundamental thing beneath all of this is the fact that in the moment, an individual will choose urgent over important. In the moment, a human being will choose urgent over important, which means you've got to have a system around this. And that's where these commitments come in. That's where, okay, my commitment for the week is I'm blocking my morning on Tuesday morning for the 10. I'm shutting my distractions down. I'm actually going to leave the office. I'm going to go somewhere. Like I'm going to make a commitment so that lead measure will happen.
Hi, I'm Chris Reynolds, and I'm on a mission to help independent financial advisors build a better business through a remarkable client experience. In this podcast, you're going to learn how to do that from my conversations with the visionaries, the leaders, the independent advisors who are reshaping the future of the financial advice industry. At the end of each episode, you're going to walk away with an actionable idea that you can take and use right now, and it will help you to build a better business today. This is Turning the Page. Today, I'm very, very excited because this is a topic that I think every business owner really needs to dive into. There's a great, and I read it in Chris's book, which is you can learn strategy in almost every business school. They teach every business school. They have course after course after course after course on strategy and how to, come up with strategy and what company strategy should be. But hardly, in fact, I don't think I've ever seen one on execution. And the most important part of strategy is actually executing. So today's podcast, we have Chris McChesney from 4DX, the 4 disciplines of execution. I met Chris many years ago. He was a keynote speaker at one of our conferences and did such a fantastic job. His book, I think I've read it now 6-7 times. I watch him regularly on his videos. In fact, as recently as this weekend, just to refreshen up. And I sent it to my whole leadership team again. I'm like, this is what happens. You go down a track and then you get comfortable and then you got to go back to the track. So Chris, it is such a pleasure to have you. As I said, I've been a huge fan. You've literally changed, how I look at business. Wow. Thank you for coming on my podcast.
Oh, I'm honored, Chris. Thank you so much. That is so nice. And I love that you're going back into the work periodically. That is very rewarding to hear.
Oh,
especially this time of the year, right?
Right after this, because it needed that refresher. Sometimes you need that refresher. And I was back to my whole team. I'm like, are we still doing all this all the way down the organization? I know we do it here, but this podcast is going to motivate everybody to not only contact you, but keep going down this path because it's a successful one. But Chris, let's start with your story. Why don't you tell us, how did you get here? How did this happen? And how are you here right now?
Thanks. Yeah, all right. So really the short version, and it's a little bit of irony because I may be the last person that you would expect if you knew me before to be talking about execution, or particularly the word discipline. I have this raging case of attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. So many, and I'm not saying that's across the board with entrepreneurs, but there are certain characteristics that I really find.
You and me both, brother.
and it was interesting. Some of my co-authors were just really good at execution. They're very disciplined. And I was like the antithesis of this. So for me, it's a little bit like Ritalin. Matter of fact, when the book hit the bestseller list, the Dallas Morning News did an article, and they were very proud of themselves because afterwards they had a headline that said, "Ritalin kid helps company focus."
I love that. That's fantastic. So I want a headline like that.
I got involved with Stephen Covey 30 years ago. I was a big fan of the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. About 20 years ago, Franklin Covey went hard on this topic of execution, Chris, for all the reasons you just stated. Yeah. So really, we've been working one problem for 20 years. That's the short version of this. And I'm the last person that probably ought to be talking about this stuff.
Actually, that's why I think this is great, because most of my audience are entrepreneurs.
Yep.
They have the same thing. We know, we love to come up with ideas.
Oh, we love the new idea.
Putting them together. That's the hard part. Right. So your company, and you guys developed this, the 4 disciplines of execution, to solve specifically this problem of execution. So maybe describe for the listeners, what are the 4 disciplines and why are they critical? And then we can dive into each one a little bit more detail.
So at a high level, and I was thinking about, as you were giving this introduction and you were talking about why so many classes on strategy and there's so little information on execution. And I think one of the reasons, Chris, for that is that execution often feels very particular to my situation.
Right.
So to come up with, it doesn't lend itself to best practices that can be easily shared from one environment to the other. But our whole thing was, best practices are okay and principles are gold.
Right.
And
principles are gold.
This was something that Stephen Covey got into our heads, was the distinction between practices and principles. And so after 20 years, it's like we really believe there are 4 underlying principles that apply everywhere. And as soon as you say them out loud, people get them. Like they see it in their own life. So the first one is the principle of focus. And the discipline's called Focus on the Wildly Important. And this one is all about creating a distinction in your brain between all the things in life that have to be maintained and sustained and are urgent and are acting on you right now, and what is the single strategic priority. And that, now how that breaks it, we can talk about how that breaks into bigger organizations, all the ins and outs of that, but it doesn't come naturally to human beings to create clear delineation between life support and significant achievement. And so discipline 1's all about, that's what we mean by focus. We mean by separating those 2 things. Discipline 2 is then the principle of leverage, which says once you've got this thing identified, the reason you identified it is because it's hard and you ain't doing it right now.
Because it's hard to do.
Right? So that thing lives at the intersection of really important, and I don't think it's going to happen. And so the leverage is all about sort of Pareto's law, the 80-20 rule.
Right.
And, the rock, the boulder, I love the metaphor of the boulder that's too hard to lift, but a lever, I can move that. And a lever is influenceable and it's predictive. If I can move that lever, that rock's going to roll.
Right.
And so we can get into examples or talk about this. This is the one a lot of people are attracted to our work because of the work we've done around what we call lead measures.
Right.
And discipline 2 is act on the lead measure. So discipline 1's focus, discipline 2 is act on the lead measures. I really identifying, and we don't mean act on the lead measures for everything. We mean act on the lead measures for that targeted, focused objective. Discipline 3 then is create a compelling scoreboard. And the principle is engagement. And it's about, well, I'll tell you a great quote. Chris, I don't know if you've done anything on Atomic Habits.
Yes, another great book.
Right? It's the only, in the last 20 years, it's the only book in this genre that I finished and then went right back to the beginning and started reading again.
Right.
And the aptly named James Clear, who's the author, right? It's good, right?
Yeah, I like it.
He's very clear.
Made for this.
Right? He's built for this, right? Clear says, I love this quote, we don't rise to the level of our goals, we fall to the level of our systems.
Ooh, I like that.
Right? And he is
remember that one.
All about getting off of sort of the emotional push for a goal. And he says, yeah, that's great, but it's going to come down to what systems you have. And so one of the other things Clear said is that of the 12 million receptors going into our brain for input, 11 million of them are visual.
True. So true.
Right. And so we're maybe more visual than we realize. And we didn't know this when we dedicated a discipline to keep a compelling scoreboard. But it's basically, look, if you can't see it, it's gone. It's particularly because it's competing with all that stuff in the day job. That's life support. Okay, so discipline 3 is keep it compelling. Can I see the lead measure? Can I see the outcome or lag measure in real time? And these sound so simple. They actually sound like common sense. So you go and try it, right? And once you try it, you're like, oh, this is hard. Right. And then the fourth one is the principle of accountability. And the discipline's called create a cadence of accountability. And the notion there is force against leverage. If disciplines 1, 2, and 3 have sort of set up the game, here's the goal, here's the lead measures, I can see it in real time. Discipline 4 is we're going to pull on that lever every week. What are the commitments I'm going to make that in addition to all the stuff I got to do, I'm going to get traction on that wildly important goal. And by the way, that's what we call those core objectives. People know that term from this, WIGs, right? Or wildly important goals. Right. So focus, have I separated wildly important from the day job? Leverage, do I know my lead measures? Engagement, can I see it in real time, like a player's scoreboard in an arena? And then accountability, are we applying force against leverage every week? So that might be a record. That might be the fastest overview of 4DX I've ever.
And I think, Ed, as somebody who has, as I said, read your book, studied it, implemented it within our organization, I thought that was fantastic. We did that in like, let's say 10 minutes, but because I think all the audience, again, entrepreneurs, we want a winnable game, right? And this is one of the basic principles is how do you create and how do you set up a winnable game? And the start is that wildly important goal. So maybe you might have some examples for our audience of what is a wildly important goal, because that's the first thing. And it's hard to get your head around that because, to your point, the whirlwind will eat up all of your day if you let it. So how do you continue that focus, which is so critical to success for an entrepreneur?
I like where you're starting. And this is something we have struggled with in terms of communicating. Matter of fact, we launched the second edition of the book 18 months ago because of how much we misled people around what the word wildly important goal really meant. So for instance, if I'm running my own shop, I'm an entrepreneur. Maybe I've got people working for me, maybe I don't. Right. When you ask me what's wildly important, my brain goes all the way to the top. It goes to bottom line, growth, it goes to these macro objectives, and that is not what we're talking about. Right. So if those macro objectives, like whether it's total sales or profitability, if those represent the title of a book, your wildly important goal is the chapter in the book that's going to make all the difference. Right. Just coming down from title to chapter makes the rest of the disciplines come alive. If you try and apply lead measures to macro objectives, you're just going to get very frustrated. And truth is that macro objective, even though you can say it in a short sentence, increase profitability, something like that, it doesn't represent focus. If the objective encompasses the sum total of all your work, you have not narrowed your focus. And so coming down and saying, okay, in addition to everything that we're maintaining, the difference maker is these category B accounts. There's if and it may not pay off in the short term, but I'm going to put strategic, disproportionate energy against that chapter. Right then, and because it's gonna suffer because of the day job. Like the short money, the easy turns are gonna be so tempting. I know I'm never gonna build the business that I want, right? Or maybe a different scenario. I've got a problem. We're losing accounts, right? And we've got to do something. So we've got to improve client retention from X to Y by when. That's the other thing about this, Chris. It's got to be in the form of a specific target. But anything you want to respond to that first thing about title and chapter, Chris, does that make sense to you in your mind? It does.
And I wanted to dwell on this because I know as somebody who has implemented it within a large organization,
you get this.
When you have 300 employees and another 1,200 advisors that you're servicing, the hardest thing to get everyone's head around was what is a wildly important goal. And to your point, people get their head around one thing. To your point, they go right to the top, right? They're like, we want profitability. Everyone wants profitability. Well, what's preventing that profitability? To your point, maybe it's the smaller clients that are eating up resources. Maybe you're not spending enough time with your bigger clients. Maybe it is designing a better experience. We had a whole mess of them that we went almost department by department. Through.
That's really great because that's where it got to get to, right? In organizational settings, Chris, we found these wigs have no value if they don't hit the working level.
Right. The one example I remember you sharing, and actually it's in my home of Miami, was a hotel that needed to park cars. I don't know if you remember that example.
It's one of my favorites, yeah.
And that was on the scoreboard, and it was all about what they were measuring is how do they get the car back to the customer quickly. And I thought that was a great story to illustrate one small goal that made such a big difference to that particular organization.
Do you want me to do a short version of that?
Yeah, again, it's my favorite. And it really,
yeah,
helped me
it's
get my head
fascinating
around
to hear
it.
you say that, because that's not your industry or even operations, but it does bring it alive. So let's do, because I think this story also illustrates why we don't do these disciplines automatically. Because you hear them and you think, well, isn't that how people work? No, it's not.
No, I wish.
Right. So here's the setting. All right. So there's this group of people, and you know what? Funny. We have examples from Lockheed Martin and the engineers that did the F-35, but like everybody's favorite ones, like yours, Chris, there's the people that are parking cars. So we'll do parking
exactly.
cars.
The hotel one was the best. Yeah.
Right. So these people, they outsource parking at hospitals and hotels, and their wildly important goal was to not lose any accounts. And so that meant that down at the operational level, they had to improve the rating they were getting from customers. So it was a customer service wildly important goal. And they looked at the disciplines. They understood, okay, so we want to see a movement of all the things we could focus on. We want these satisfaction scores to go up. And so when they got to lead measures, which asked the question, what's predictive and what's influenceable, they had been measuring everything. So they'd been measuring, do I use the proper Ritz-Carlton greeting when you come in? Do I give you a bottle of water? Did I use your name? Did I open the door for the guest? Did I grab your bags? Like all this stuff they had been measuring. But when they thought about what's predictive and influenceable, they said, funny enough, it's the one thing we're not measuring. We said, what's that? And they said, car retrieval time.
Getting their car.
Yeah. And I said, well, if you know it's important, why didn't you measure it? And they're like, well, that's a pain in the neck because you can't spot measure it. You got to track everyone. And then you got to add it. Then you got to subtract. And no, we're like, measure it. So they did, right? And so if you see this, so they're trying to improve guest satisfaction. And they're trying to, their lead measure, their lever is getting the cars back faster. And there's this great expression that necessity is the mother of invention. So with the game on, then every week, these valets have got to come up with something to improve car retrieval time. So they were like, okay, so when they check in, give them your, they came up with this idea, give them your card and say, okay, so when you're done with your conference, just text me, I'll have the car waiting, 0 retrieval time. And then they started changing the order of the cars in the parking lot so that they knew that, okay, Chris is going to check out on Thursday, Wednesday night when they have downtime. They're going to make sure Chris's car is ready to go at the front of the lot. And it was just stuff nobody'd ever thought of. Right. But like you said, winnable game. It was game on. So the only reason that this is a story is because, well, you're in, Chris, you're in Miami. I'm in Miami.
Right? I actually know the hotel.
You know the hotel, right?
All the time. That's why it has a special place in my heart.
In your heart, right? So the Lowe's Hotel in Miami was the parking was being run by this town park company. Great organization, by the way. And they were having a real struggle because of the arrangement of the parking lot. They had a concrete wall where they had to park the cars 3 deep, which means if you need a car from the front of the line, you got to move 3 cars. And they were just struggling. And so one week, and this is in the book, and I love that Chris remember this. One week, one of the valet supervisors made the weekly commitment that the wall is coming out.
I love it.
Right? This kid's father worked for a construction company. They pulled 10 tons of concrete, and the executives, when they're telling the story, they always say, if this had been our idea, they wouldn't have done it at gunpoint. But it was their idea. So there's your town park story.
I love that story. And again, it's because it became a game. And then, so the other concept that again, sometimes people struggle with is this lead measure as opposed to, the lagging measure. Legs are easy. Legs are what accountants are for, right? Legs will tell you how much money you made. They can count the beans for you. The harder part is what were the tactics that actually led to those results? And maybe you can give some examples of good lead measures or where you've seen these really become effective.
Right. So the most universal lead measure is really closely associated with New Year's resolutions and weight loss. Everybody's favorite New Year's resolution. And as soon as you say lag and lead, people get it. Okay, the lag measures my weight. Diet and exercise is my lead. But I want you to be careful right here. A lead measure is not a casual awareness of what I ought to do.
Right.
A lead measure is an actual number that you're counting. Your body wants no part of losing 20 pounds.
Exactly.
It's going to fool you, trick you, mess with you, and it's got the wires. Like it can bet. There's this thing called confirmation bias. It'll tell you all kinds of stuff that isn't true.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right? You didn't eat any desserts last week. You worked out 3, probably 4 times. No, you didn't. Right? So if you know somebody that's lost 30 pounds, which is really tough, I'm going to make you a promise that that person was counting something.
Right.
Every single time. Yep. And they had dialed it in. And so the lead measure has to be the type of thing that you can directly influence. This is not the same. And I'm glad you're asking this question, Chris. This is not the same as a predictive indicator. I'll tell you why. Rainfall is a great predictive indicator of crop growth. Right. But it's not a good lead measure because I can't influence.
Right. Can't do anything about it.
I can't do anything about the rain. Right. If I want my kids to do better in school, the lag measures the grades. The lead measure, it's not homework and study. It's current homework average, number of hours Sarah spends studying. You've got to get, and again, you're not applying this treatment to all of your metrics. Don't get greedy with this.
Right.
Have you noticed this, Chris?
Very focused. Right.
Because we're working with a hospital, and the hospital said that they treated their wildly important goals like they were taking an issue to intensive care. There's lots of great medicine happening all over the hospital outside the intensive care unit. But if you go to intensive care, you're getting the full treatment. And that's what a WIG is, right? So we're going to track lead measures. We're going to scoreboard it. We're going to, right? So for instance, I know, let's take a sales example. Maybe we want more new accounts.
Right.
Want new clients. And I know that first appointments have a predictive ratio around new accounts, but I'm struggling. Like I've burned through the people that I know. I watch other reps that seem to be able to generate first appointments whenever they want. I know that first appointments convert at about a 3-to-1 ratio, and I'm really struggling. Okay.
Right.
So that would be an example of something that I know is predictive, but I can't influence it. Right now, I might go to the other extreme and I might go, okay, cold calling. Right. But then I might be in a situation where I'm moving the lever, but the pole's bending, the rock's not moving.
Right. Not going
I'm making the calls. That's one of the levels of hell. I don't know which one it is. I think it's 6, but it's one of the levels. So it can be predictive, but not influenceable. It can be influenceable, but not predictive. Sometimes, I don't know if you've thought through this or not, Chris, sometimes you got to go with a slightly smaller rock.
Right.
So instead of the WIG being new accounts, what if we made the WIG first appointments?
Right. That's what I mean. Yeah.
Right. And now what if
looking at it? Yeah.
Right. Let's break it. Because what we want is a winnable game that matters. And do new first appointments matter? Yeah, we know they do. We know they convert. But now it changes my thinking. So now I'm trying to apply a lead. I can't get that rock to move on its own. So let me put a lever. All right. We have a lot of people that like us. They know people. Let's just double down on, for the next 4 months, let's double down on referral leads for first appointments. Now now that dog will hunt. I got a winnable game. It's something I can move that lever, and it's got a predictive outcome, or at least I believe, right, that it does. So that, anyways, I don't know if that's a helpful example or not.
It's a great example, because anyone in the financial industry, certainly, I've been at it a long time. And here's a principle that you learn when you first get licensed. It's called 10-3-1.
Yeah.
Everybody knows this ratio. In the end, you have 10 conversations, 3 will be interested, and 1 will become your client.
Yeah. That's
just track. And so, when we started, it was like, how could I get through my 10 as quick as possible? Because you knew if you can get through your 10, you're going to have 3 people who you're going to have good conversations with, and 1 that'll be like, yeah, that's something that I need for myself. And that sticks with me. That's 30 years. And
well, let's stay, Chris, let's stay on this one for a second. There's a poison pill in 10-3-1. And the poison pill is, tell me if you agree with this or disagree, but I think you'll agree. The poison pill is that those 10 conversations will never be urgent.
Exactly. It's the least urgent because of the hardest thing to do.
Because I can do, I'll do 5 today, I'll do 15 tomorrow. Well, I didn't get to my 5. That's okay. I can make up, I'll do 5 in addition the next 2 days. Oh crap, it's Friday. Right. And then where did the day go? Well, I'd like to do 10-3-1, boss, but I'm just hammered right now. I'm having a really hard time. We don't rise to the level of our goals. We fall to the level of our systems. The fundamental thing beneath all of this is the fact that in the moment, an individual will choose urgent over important. In the moment, a human being will choose urgent over important, which means you've got to have a system around this. And that's where these commitments come in. That's where, okay, my commitment for the week is I'm blocking my morning on Tuesday morning for the 10. I'm shutting my distractions down. I'm actually going to leave the office. I'm going to go somewhere. Like I'm going to make a commitment so that lead measure will happen. And that's really, Chris, there's no magic to this.
No, not at all.
The disciplines are all about putting energy against non-urgent activity, which doesn't want to happen on its own.
Well, this goes to sort of the other disciplines, and one that I can tell you from experience works, which is scoreboarding.
Right.
We have in our office, well, pandemic sort of put a sort of kibosh on that, which we're trying to bring back now because we're going to get actually people in the office again. But we have a whole wall which people put their scoreboards on. So public display of scoreboarding.
Yes, good for you. Not everybody's willing to do that.
And it is so effective because human beings want to be judged by their peers of being successful. So once you make it, to your point, a game and a winnable game, and they know how to keep score, which is the scoreboard, it shockingly
love that you're saying
behavior this. Like there's no tomorrow. And
it's surprising, right? It'll beat your best expectations if you do it right.
Every single time. You don't have to manage people after that. You just have to manage the discipline of updating the scoreboard on a regular basis.
There it is.
I was at another hotel in another city at one point, and a door opened to some place where obviously the staff went. And I could see their scoreboard as well.
Baby.
So obviously an organization.
Was it a Marriott?
As well.
Do you remember?
I think actually it was a Marriott.
We've got about 10,000 leaders at Marriott doing this, so I wouldn't be surprised.
And so I'm like, yep, that's it. And so maybe just briefly describe that scoreboarding
So the best
concept.
The best way to think about this, in my mind, is player scoreboard versus coaching scoreboard. Which is not something, once you say it, people see it. So we're in the middle of basketball season. Think about the data that coach has handed at halftime. Here's how many assists versus turnovers. Here's how many minutes your key players have already burned. Here's how many fouls your key players have. Here's like, what's your second half lineup look like? Like there's all kinds of data that coach is, who's hot right now, right? Are we getting to the paint? Who are we rebounding? Like that coach, and the difference between a good coach and a bad coach is a big deal.
Right. Yeah.
So what I'm saying is coaching data is really valuable, but it ain't what the players are looking at.
Nope.
So what we're talking about is the other scoreboard. That's the one in the arena. And in basketball, there's two things. So first principle, it's separate.
Yep.
Don't mix it in with everything else. It's got the lag measure. That's the score. It's got the lead measure. Now you think, well, what's a lead measure in basketball? It's the 24-second shot clock. They're coming down. They're looking at that thing the whole time. They are focused on that lead measure. They've got 24 seconds to set up the best shot they can set up. Lead and lag. Football, down and distance is the lead.
Down and distance
is the lag. Right? Hockey, shots on goal, goals. So it's like, if you want to, and then it's funny, the networks know this. So on your television set, right? They might not know what we mean by lead and lag measures, but down in the corner, right? 14-7, 3rd and 5. That was your score, and you're down in distance because they're trying to engage you in the game. So I don't know if that's helpful, but think
very helpful.
Think separate, think lead and lag. And then the last one is it's got to just tell me immediately, winning or losing.
Right. Okay. I was going to say, it's got to be simple. Right. Yep. The one thing that we have learned by experience is when we first started this process,
you overdid it.
Yeah. Way too complicated and way too much stuff. And again, creative though, we have some very creative looking scoreboards, but then you're like,
but it wears off, right? It's more about the game,
right?
Isn't it?
Right.
Right. And can I see the game? At first, the fun stuff, and we like that too. We like the engagement from building a fun scoreboard, but it really comes down to does this feel like a winnable game?
Yeah. And then the last one, which is, again, it brings it all together, which is accountability. Right? What I was saying this the other day to somebody, I'm like, you know what holds society together even more? You know why crime rates have dropped? because everyone has a camera. Accountability.
Wow.
When you're
Yeah.
that transparent,
You
everyone's
can't
like,
do anything,
I better be
right?
good. Yeah, I
I
better
know.
be good because everybody's watching me. So that level of accountability, because as we started, our conversation talking about that whirlwind, it'll suck you in. That urgent but not important will suck you in. But if you know you're accountable for delivering onto a winning game, that changes your priorities.
So here's what we mean by discipline 4. If you haven't gotten this yet, these disciplines really are more about pulling people in than pushing an agenda, right? So you're trying to get their input on lead measures. You're trying to get them to sort of design the scoreboard. And then the weekly commitment, you don't want to tell them their commitment. You want to say, okay, Jake, based on your scoreboard, what you're looking at, what are the 2 commitments this week? So you're not committing to the lead measure. You've already done that.
Right.
You're committing to something that's going to ensure the lead measure. So if my lead measure was run 6 miles a week, and I know it's going to rain next week, and I hate running in the rain, what's your commitment, Chris? All right, I'm going to get the treadmill out of the attic on Tuesday. I'm going to sign up. I'm going to sign up for that membership at that club. I'm going to call Susan, because you call her, she's going to make you run if it's a typhoon, right? I'm going to do something to make sure. And so if this meeting happens automatic, because if the meeting doesn't happen, we won't tell you that the other 3 disciplines will do you any good.
Right.
Otherwise, the day job will destroy all of that. It's only that weekly attack that keeps the rest of the system engaged and active and working. And the last thing I would say on this is that accountability gets a bad rap. People think that accountability is used, that word, it has a bad rap. And this is a healthy kind of accountability. This is not being accountable for some metric I can't control. This is something I can do this week that will have the biggest impact on keeping that a winnable game.
Absolutely. And you've probably studied this before, the whole concept of whirlwind or flywheel. I'm sorry, flywheel.
Yeah, yes,
which is
yes.
Success builds on more success. So by being accountable, you're like, hey, man, I did this. So, that's why Weight Watchers and a lot of these types of systems work, because of the accountability aspect. Yes. So the best leaders I know and I've ever met are the ones who can hold you accountable because they want the best from you, because they're trying to make and help you be better. And they can see how to do that
right now. That really good leaders, you think about the best leaders that you've ever had or seen, or the best parents. It wasn't soft. They wanted a lot for you. And they were willing to sometimes even jeopardize the relationship because you might have mattered to them more than how you felt about them, if that made any sense at all. If you got kids, you know what I'm talking about. There's sometimes you'll jeopardize. You'll go someplace that's hard because you want something, you really want something from them. And so healthy accountability and being okay with that, and setting a norm that says, okay, don't overcommit, but whatever you commit,
you got to do it.
You got to bring it, man. Yeah. Right. And then leaders have to walk the talk as well. So yeah, Chris, I really love the way that you just articulated that.
Well, on the flight, just flew back from down south, and on the movie was Whiplash. I don't know if you saw it, about the drummer who
Yes, it's my son's a drummer. This is his favorite movie. Yeah. Whiplash is hard for me to watch. It's a rough movie.
It's a rough movie, but at the end,
it over the break, and I just I couldn't. Yeah, because that actor is so intense. It's brutal.
But his little speech at the end, which is, I wanted to make people great, and I think that's that comes to that accountability. We could probably keep down this path for another hour and a half, 2 hours. Right. I know I love this topic, and I talk about it all the time, and I give all the credit to you and your team. Oh. They've done such a fantastic job. Anyone who has not read 40X, the 4 disciplines of execution, I think it should be mandatory teaching in all universities. I think it's fantastic.
We're getting there. We got some inroads.
It should be this should be a mandatory course, I believe, for every student who wants to actually run a business and be successful at this business. So, we're very privileged to have you on the podcast.
Thank you. Thank you, Chris.
And as I said, and your keynote speak. If anyone gets the chance to see Chris speak anywhere, go and
Very
see him
kind.
speak. Very, very, very motivating. So Chris, with that, anything to leave our audience with?
Yeah. One thing, if it's okay. This, and we didn't know this at first, this has powerful parenting implications. So, and I'll tell you, I don't mean scoreboarding and lead measures and all that. What I mean is winnable game. So we've raised 6 teenagers and are raising our 7th teenager right now. And what we did is we got out of the drama business, which to a teenager is like whirlwind. And instead,
Exactly.
right? If you have teenagers, they all have drama.
Yeah.
Instead, the focus, our parenting focus has been on what's the winnable game in this kid's life. And sometimes it's easy and sometimes it's hard. But once they have one thing in their life that they're winning at, it fundamentally changes the way they deal with the drama. Drama doesn't go away. They just deal with it differently when that thing is in place. And so it for whatever reason, this has had a really big impact. That little idea had a really big impact on our family.
That, you know what? I never would have thought of that. And you're absolutely right. You know, that kind of, these principles apply all the way. It's not just a business principle.
Right.
It's
Principles,
a
right.
life principle.
Yeah.
That is fantastic. So Chris, thanks once again. Thanks for being on, and to the audience, happy to have a chat with you. If you're wanting to talk about your wildly important goal or how to build a winnable game, anytime, you can always hit me up for a virtual coffee. I love doing those. So always available. With that, Chris, thank you very much, and look forward to our next podcast.
Let's connect soon. Right on.
All right. Cheers.
Thanks so much.
Thanks for joining me on Turning the Page. What did you learn from today's episode? If you follow me on LinkedIn, please drop me a comment there. I'd love to chat with you about it over a virtual coffee. Send me a message on LinkedIn, or you can do so at our website. The link's in the show notes. I'm Chris Reynolds, and until next time.